The only life Santa Laffigan has ever known has become her prison. Vicious gossip is everywhere. Whispers of a scandal have turned to accusations of murder, and fingers are pointing her way. Feeling powerless and alone, she yearns for escape. When Sanfa stumbles upon a small, rusted key in the forest near her home, it seems her silent pleas have been answered. Awakened by her touch, the key demands to be heard, and she is not the only one to heed its call. Thrust into a world only glimpsed in the stories of her childhood, of fairies and princes and eldritch magic, Sanfa sets out to unlock its secrets. But uncovering the truth has its own perils, and as the key's influence grows, she'll be left with a choice: survival or sacrifice. But will it truly be hers to make? All the while in the north, something ancient stirs. A great power that could unravel the very threads of existence. Oh, hello. I didn't notice you there. Welcome once again to The Heir's Lair. I'm your host, Jonathan Taylor. If you haven't been able to piece it together yet, this video will be another book review. The book in question being... hold on just a minute. Beckoning of the Gate. The first book in the Bailey and Fred series, first and so far only one, by Australian author Benjamin J. Ryan. The TLDW of this book is... it's something you might be interested in if you're looking for a quest fantasy story with a soft magic system and a surprisingly well-developed cosmogony. It is also written in such a way that it is easy enough to go through, despite being relatively long at over 400 pages. So if that's something that might sound interesting to you, then go right ahead. For those of you who want a little bit more detail, well, that's what I'm going to provide you with. This, coincidentally, is the second fantasy book written by an Australian author that I've reviewed on this channel. The first one will be linked in the iCard above. The nationalities of their authors is not the only thing these stories have in common. Both of them are quest fantasy stories. Both of them have a young female character as their main character. Both of these young MCs have never left their place of birth, and both of them are compelled on their quest by finding an item that several powerful and malicious entities are also looking to get their hands on. This, however, is where the superficial similarities end, because unlike Leonie, the main character of City of Bridges, Sanfa, the main character of this book, grew up in a small town rather than her nation's capital, is a goat herder rather than a thief, and while they do have some level of emotional baggage between them, all of Sanfa's baggage is caused by more recent developments. So she hasn't really had her whole life to deal with them the same way Leonie had. Regardless, it's not just as you've been able to piece together from the description I've read, it's not just that baggage that sends her on a quest, but it does facilitate that. What exactly the aim of her quest is, or the motivation behind it, I can't really say because I want to keep this review somewhat spoiler-free. So you'll have to read the book in order to find that out. So what can I reveal about the book? Well, as I've said in my TLDW, it is actually written in a way that is very engaging and easy to follow. You can read it fast, you can read it slow. You'll probably still find it enjoyable, and also find various aspects that are enjoyable. There are two things I want to mention here in particular. Namely, the way the storytelling or the plot itself actually unfolds. It's not exactly filled, but it does have enough twists and turns that are delivered at a very easy to follow rate that still manages to keep itself still manages to keep itself interesting, and I can't help but admire that. All of these turns are easy enough to relate to and to follow. That leaves the stakes somewhat inconsistent, but I do like the way they but I do like the way they change to at least to a certain extent. Also, as I mentioned in the TLDW, the cosmogony is very well developed. We get a good insight into the metaphysics of the world, and also, and much more pronouncedly actually, uh, a great overview not just of what kinds of supernatural creatures exist in this world, but also how they relate to and interact with their environment. So for the most part, that makes this book interesting enough to follow and enjoyable to read. Is there anything that goes against that level of enjoyability? Well, regrettably for me, there have been some. As I said a little earlier, the stakes are somewhat inconsistent throughout the story. It starts with the readers being concerned about the safety and well-being of the main character, and then of those of her friends and family, and then those of whoever she happens to find on her quest. With the actual aim of the quest itself becoming somewhat going more into the background. So not and therefore kind of losing therefore you're kind of losing the focus on the story. It it is understandable as I've explained, but it still comes across as kind of a chaotic mess. And not the fun, anything can happen, so you want to read through it to find out what will happen kind of way, but more in a jumbled, the author just kind of makes the story up as the story goes along, and there isn't really enough afterthought or hindsight put into it kind of way. That affects not just the stakes of the story regularly, but also the characterization throughout the narrative. There are some interesting characters that are part of this character roster, but they are quite few and far between. Most of the characters are regrettably just archetypes for the most part, including the MC. They do they do well within the roles they are given, but they don't really transcend their roles. They don't really make themselves particularly memorable. At least not to me. I really could have used learning more about them and learning more about what makes them specific, what makes them tick, what characteristics are unique to them and them alone. And don't get me wrong, this book could have very much benefited from going into such explanations. One example I could name, and in fact the best example I could name, is actually related to one of the fantastical creatures, or rather a specific set of fantastical creatures. These creatures are most at home when they are taking care of a homestead. They are referred to in story as brownies and speak in broken English. Do I even need to spell it out? You could argue that this story approaches society from a more medieval standpoint, and therefore certain characteristics that are less than woke are to some extent excusable or justifiable. To which I'll say that is still just pretense. Like, I'm sorry, it's just pretense. And the worst part of it, it's not even good pretense. Like, there's been a lot of great medieval fantasy and influential medieval fantasy that old Benno could have used as inspiration. And I'll only name one that's recently fresh in my memory, The Witcher, as an example. The Witcher also has fantastical creatures that live within and alongside human societies, and which are also described by their own sets of proclivities and archetypes. But they are more than just proclivities and archetypes. They are also these creatures are also have their own personalities and motivations and backstories. They have their own things that distinctly characterize them, and that is something I don't really find in this book among the not just among the side characters, but also among some of the leading characters of this book. And regrettably, yeah, I'm left disappointed by what I've read in in this book. Overall, while I have to say that the writing of this book is quite competent from a technical standpoint, the actual content that is being written within this book sadly leaves a lot to be desired. For that reason, my final rating for Beckoning of the Gate is a 2 out of 5. And yeah, that was my review, my last review of the calendar year. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, then please leave a like and maybe even share it wherever you think other people will like it as well. If you have anything you'd like to add to any part of the review, the comment section awaits your input. And if you want to see when my next video, the last of the calendar year, will drop, well then please subscribe. Ideally also ring the bell or do whatever else YouTube will ask of you in order to keep you notified. Until next time, I'm Jonathan Taylor, and this has been The Heir's Lair.